So, thank you so much for making it into this session. I have no idea how long I'm going to speak, but I have a structure I want to go through to share my thinking and more than that, my practical approach, experiential, based on my experiences of how to create what I call the asshole-free zone. And just to be clear, in the asshole is somebody who is entirely misaligned and not in any way supportive of what my mission might be. It is not to mistake with my harshest critics, who are my best friends, right? So I think that's really, really important to note right from the get-go. But in order to make, so I'm gonna riff on that for a while, and as you've already noticed, I haven't practiced this in any way, and then I'd like to open it for a discussion on your experiences around how to optimize for an environment that is beneficial to things like group flow and a thriving group that wants to solve a problem together. Oh, by the way, if I'm looking from side to side, I have two more screens to look at the other conversations here, because I'm in a double role here at the moment. I'm also trying to take care of the whole conversation, whole conference. Okay, so now let's get into part one of 3 parts, breaking apart this sentence, how to heal and stay sane in an insane world. And for that, I'd like to first break apart what does it mean to be in an insane world. And essentially, the way I see this, and I'm using borrowed language here from mostly the Game B people, Daniel Schmachtenberger, Jordan Hall, Jim Rutt, is the multipolar trap. And the multipolar trap creates a situation where everybody is somehow systemically locked in and starts behaving in ways that are not beneficial to the overall system, or not beneficial to the individuals in the system, but beneficial to the overall system. And that is a problem at scale, which can lead to the really tragic situation of several collapse and chaos growth phases that we're experiencing right now. So climate chaos, but also the chaos in the information and trust environment, and other places. And what constitutes the two most important elements of this multipolar trap are essentially 2 things. One, what Jim Rutt would call the money over money return, which is defined by our financial system. And I'm not talking about the operating system we put on top of our financial system. So this is true regardless of whether we use something like capitalism or something like communism. As long as you use a fiat currency that is backed by GDP, you're essentially creating money that is backed by itself, and thereby you are forced to create more of it. So that works simply by inventing money out of thin air. That's what fiat is. attaching mostly a positive interest rate, then you create even more of that. It creates more of it by itself.
So, ich muss das noch was abspeichern.
And then
was kann ich tun?
Just gonna mute here quick. And then we back this by GDP, and all we measure with the GDP is essentially how much money we can put through an economy in one region in a certain given time frame. And this is, in a way, you can think about this very easily by saying we turn nature and human resources into money. That's what we do. So that is the one part of the trap, because that is an invitation to destroy. That is an invitation to exploit. So an oil spill is very good for the GDP, right? Things like that are very, very good for the GDP. Wars are really, really good for the GDP. And this is feeding lots of our devastation of the planet at the moment, and also lots of the isolation and the grief and the sadness and the frustration of the people all over. So only that couldn't hold us, right? This is like one arm. We can just slide out under that arm easily, but there's a second arm that is holding us, and that second arm is our poor configuration of our democracy. So democracy is an amazing thing, and I really value our democracy, the concept of democracy, but I don't really value the way we are doing it right now. And the reason is that we are organizing ourselves in our democracy in a short-term marketing cycle. And the short-term marketing cycle is not optimizing towards solving real issues, but it is solving towards being re-elected. And if you solve towards being re-elected, you cannot have meaningful conversations. You cannot have deep thoughts, complex arguments that need to be thoroughly understood to make a meaningful and proper decision. But instead, you are going to be very shallow. You stay on the surface and you distract from the real issues by means of competition, right? So, and in that environment, the political sphere cannot do what we would expect from it, to take some form of control and to redistribution and equalization of what is happening with the money over money return part of the trap. So we are losing our coordination capacity as the people to actually use this to our benefit. This amazing system we have, because the financial system or money currency is an amazing system. So we're thinking or acting and then freezing our thinking in decisions like the financial system or the political system, based on some activity, on something that rests in us. And while these two elements that I just described of the multipolar trap could be already called generator functions, I think it's worth going even deeper and seeing where might be the source of the problem, the first principle of why do we actually decide to set up our self-governance systems in such a way. And where this leads is to a situation where we started really relying, as a species, really relying on our executive network. So the parts or the parts of our brain that constitute our capacity for structuring, for planning, for creating tools that extend the capacity of our fist, right? So we started out with our fist, and at one point we figured that we could add something to that fist that would make it better. And once we figured that out, we moved on from there. And now we have the capacity to basically destroy life on this planet with one fist. And so we've really built on this logical part of our mind. And it turns out that this logical part of our mind is the executive network, or how Daniel Kahneman would probably call it, system 2, is sitting in our left hemisphere, controlling our right hand. So there's a connection directly between using tools, because most of us are right-handed, and the left hemisphere, which is our structuring executive network. And an indicator of that, there's a very interesting book, and she's also done a TED Talk about this by a lady, I'm forgetting the name right now, but it's called A Stroke of Insight. What happened to her was that she, as a neuroscientist, experienced a stroke. And that stroke hit her left hemisphere. And although she was conscious of what was going on, she was also experiencing it in a non-threatening way. She was experiencing it as peaceful and as connected with the world. And this is exactly what happens when you switch off your executive network. So this directly leads me into healing. Thank you, Aman. Aman just posted the name. Into healing. How can we heal? Right? In this world that gives us incentives to do things that we believe we should be doing because the system wants it from us, and we should be buying the next iPhone, and I'm also part of that, right? So next iPhone, next this, next that. How do we heal from these pressures? Because we feel inside of ourselves, and I have yet to come across a human who doesn't feel that. We feel inside of ourselves that this is wrong, right? Just as a side note, when you think about what makes humans distinct from machines, if you assume that machines can potentially in the future do whatever we can do, just better if they want to. What is and even if it's just a thought experiment, what is the difference between us? And we could argue that machines could start loving. We might not understand how they love. I don't know how a giraffe loves, but I'm sure a giraffe loves. So a machine might love differently, but they might love. So there's nothing they inherently can't do that we can. But we are vulnerable. Machines can be fixed much more easily. Our hardware and our software is super hard to fix. For a machine, you can just plug in a new arm, you can roll back to a previous software state, you can roll back to a previous data state. If the data messed up your whatever you were doing. So you can do that. We can't do that. And that vulnerability is what we're all sensing, but we don't have space to express it. And I think this is part of where the healing begins. And this is also part of where we look into what happens if we start switching off our executive network. And I call this activity deep alignment. Deep alignment being getting in touch with the fundamental programming of system one. So the heuristics that somebody put into your mind, hopefully and probably well-meaning, well-intended, and hopefully with love. And that was done usually in the first 7 years of your life. That's where you get your most important heuristics from. Those heuristics guide you through your day. They help you make decisions fast. System one, as Daniel Kahneman pointed out, is responsible for more than 90% of your decision-making throughout the day. And it's unconscious. You don't know you're making these decisions. You know that since the 70s, we've done all sorts of experiments around this, where we could measure brain activity that was correlated with decision making, and the decision happened before we even knew it, and we were retrospectively with our left hemisphere, system two, our logical mind, making sense of it, explaining retroactively. So how do we do this? How do we unclutter our system one and somehow make decisions for us during the day that we are aligned with? We, meaning our other part of us, our system two, our executive network. Looking at the world, understanding what is going on, looking at the world, structuring and planning where we want to go, and then feeling that whatever we do during the day is absolutely aligned with that. That's where we want to be. And so I don't have any definitive answers on that, of course, but I'd like to share a protocol that I have come up with over the time, and I could share several, and we could maybe talk about that later, and as we open up the session and share more of these tools that I'm sure all of you have, and all of you have experience with that. But one tool that I found very, very helpful for myself is a 3-day silent retreat that I've configured for myself. So as everybody was going to Vipassana retreats and all of these beautiful things, I found myself in a situation where I could not afford this. I was had a fresh baby. I had a very hectic startup. I couldn't just log out of my life for 2 weeks to go to some paradisiac location and chill with some people for 10 days. So what I did was I locked myself. I had an opportunity to lock myself into our house alone for 3 days. I switched off all machines, all computers, all communication, anything. So nothing, no machines were allowed. And the only thing, and no human interaction. So I made sure I had enough food for 3 days and everything. And it turned out actually doing this at home is really good, because you don't have so much not many new influences. So you everything you see is already known, right? So you don't overload your brain with new impressions. And then for the first day, all you do is you write everything down that comes to your mind, everything. Put it on paper. Lots of paper, probably. and write until nothing wants to come out anymore. And then go to sleep with that empty mind. The first time in a long time, probably, that you've really emptied your mind of words. That's the goal. That's what you want to do on the first day. And then on the second day, it's very likely that stuff will still come up, right? So quickly write it down. Don't think about it. Just write it, offload it. And the writing is important because then you know your brain, your executive network can trust that in the future you will look at this. Right? So there's lots of important stuff. You want to call people, you want to do things. It's all out there. So on day 2, you can allow feelings to come up. You can feel, right? We feel a lot during the day, but we hardly ever have time or give ourselves time to really engage with those feelings. And that's what this is about. And it might happen that I've had occurrences where these feelings were super intense, where I was in a state of intense anger, for example, for 24 hours. And it was really good that I haven't allowed myself to call anybody, because there were a bunch of people that I would have liked to call and really shit on them. And not for no specific reason, by the way. It was just a very diffuse anger that had accumulated over a long time. And as I was sitting there, that was the third day, as I was sitting there, staring at the wall, being angry, in a split second, all of that went away. And it was replaced by a feeling of bliss I've never experienced up to that point, and I've never experienced after that. So I've had one very, very intense session like this. I've had many of these sessions throughout the years. And day 3 usually ends up in something similar to what I just described, where you suddenly feel extremely at peace. And that one intense moment was actually very similar to how that lady, Jill Bolte Taylor, described it. It was so sudden, I was scared. I thought I'd had a stroke or something. But it felt so peaceful that I just kept sitting there. That's the one way. The other way can be that you are extremely bored. I've also had that, right? Day 3 can be horrible because there's nothing to feel, really. There's nothing to do because you're not allowed to do. There's nothing to write. There's nothing to think. It's horrible. But it's probably even then worth it. So that's just a little protocol that helps you go deep, because lots of the I usually add to that another thing that ties into some thinking around early childhood development, where it might be the case that we have 2 most important drivers as humans. So we come to this world as a very vulnerable little person, and we need to attach to somebody. So the need of attachment is a strong driver. We need to attach so we are sure that somebody will feed us, that somebody will care for us, clean us, whatever needs to be done. So the need for attachment is very deeply inherent. And the need for authenticity. We need to express that we need something, at least that we need something, maybe even later what we need. And these 2 needs get into conflict with the people we feel attachment for, right? So we start, because we have no other way of expression, we start screaming and crying, while the people we are attached to, and who hopefully are attached to us as well a little bit, want to carry on with their lives, right? They have their own issues going on. So that's and out of that conflict arises that you start suppressing your need for authenticity. So how I solve that, and this is a really a window into your system one. How I solve that is by also writing, but this time writing in a way that I am actively searching for all the dark stuff in my mind, the stuff that I would not share with anybody. And it turns out there's even stuff that I would not share with myself, right? Not in an articulate way. I feel it, but I don't articulate it. Once I articulate it, I can get a handle on it. So I write it down, and then I destroy that piece of paper that I've written it down on. And that is crucially important, because only if you destroy it, you can trust that nobody will ever get their fingers on that and know your deepest, darkest secrets, right? And that really starts unlocking some of the muck that you have in your system one, and then be able to put in new functions of what you want your system one to do for you, so that is aligned with where you want to go. So that's what I call deep alignment. So let's go into part three. What about staying sane? Well, staying sane means that the essence of this conversation here, you can live and act in an asshole-free zone. And the asshole-free zone begins by getting into coherence. This is not only true for the group. This is also true for yourself. But through the group, you are more or less, you force yourself to be very clear on your intentions if you want to create such an asshole-free zone. And the reason why this is important also ties back into the deep alignment portion, because if you want to, if you manage to unclutter your system one, you want to know what you want to put in there, right? But in order to know what you want to put in there, you want to create some fitness function for yourself. Where do you want to go? What is a good world, a world you want to live in? So you need to have an image of that. And you also need to have an image of that with your peers, because it turns out that evolution didn't really select for us. Evolution really selected for cooperation. We don't do things alone, never, right? And Neanderthals were definitely physically stronger, and there are hints that Neanderthals might also have been more intelligent than we are. But they were alone, right? They didn't help each other. And this is what we're all about. So getting into coherence with a group of people around what kind of future you want to build before you start building it is crucial. And this is also super, super hard, right? How do you describe a future? We often hold ourselves back because we say, I don't know what's going to happen. Of course you don't know. That's the future. We don't know, but we can hope for something. We can wish for something. Now you can say, I don't know enough about the details of things, right? Yeah, true. We don't know enough, but we can learn something, or we can cooperate with other people who know more. But we can also trust a very interesting idea by somebody called Stuart Kaufman, the theory of the adjacent possible. That's this very interesting notion that he came up with. And the way you can imagine the theory of the adjacent possible very intuitively is imagine two bricks of Lego. You have these 4 bump pieces, right? You have like 4 bump pieces, and you put them together into something new, an interesting shape. And then you go to the Lego factory and they start producing that new interesting shape. for you. Now you've created a new reality, right? And this new reality was adjacent to the current reality because the components of it were there already. Okay, that's the theory of the adjacent possible. And now you can start putting things together. And as you start putting things together, you see that this is an explosion, a combinatorial explosion of possibilities. You can almost imagine anything. Some people call it the shadow of the future for that same reason. So you can feel free to go crazy on your future. And you're in good company. One person who went crazy on this was Winston Churchill. In 1932, he wrote this essay called 50 Years Hence. And in this essay, he came up with the strangest pictures. He came up with cellars full of shelves, and on those shelves, we would grow chicken parts, right? So he came up with vertical farming in a way. He came up with gene editing. He added solar. He added so many things in this article. It's really worth a read. Super courageous. How crazy those ideas, 1932, right? So we have to be allowed to go crazy. And the best way to do this is to think far, far out. 50 years at least is the absolute minimum. So we think ourselves into the future of 50 years, so we can wish and we can go crazy. But we also want to have a sense of completeness. And you can come up with a framework, or you can ask me. I'm happy to share a framework with you of 7 questions that I've worked out with some really, really great people. My strongest collaborator on this was Jim Rutt, who's started Game B, basically. And we have these 7 questions that's really give you a 360-degree view of what we do as humans. How are we in the world? You can also use other frameworks. You can use Maslow or the SDGs or whatever you want to, whatever's close to you. And start filling out, really in a descriptive way, filling out those questions that arise out of those frameworks. And do this as a group, do this together. A really, really good way to do this is to start individually. Whatever framework you use, you answer these questions individually. Then you come together in small groups of 2, and you get into coherence, just the 2. And then you get into a group of 4, and you get into coherence, etc. I've done this multiple times, and it creates enormous, amazing results. You can also kick this off with something we call a tall talk. A tall talk is basically a dinner that has a very defined format where everybody has to come at the same time. You're not allowed to come in anymore if you're too late, to give everybody the same starting ground. But you also aren't allowed to do any small talk. And usually I let the people figure out what small talk is and how they want to sanction that by themselves. And that is the most important part, everybody introduces themselves to the others by describing how you want to be seen at the end of your life by your loved ones. Now that's important. I want to break that apart for one moment, because the end of it, the loved ones, is crucial. We don't care about how the New York Times writes about you, or what YouTube thinks about you, or Twitter. We only care about what you want your loved ones to think about you. Right? So that's very important. And if you do that, and if the first person to offer that to the group goes deep and vulnerable, you have the most amazing conversation ever. So that is another really, really good way to start getting into coherence with a group. And then you want to start building, right? And this is what I have least to say about, because there is I see it, I structure it for myself in a way that once you have a group of people that is in coherence about the future, and you are not, you are acting in accordance with that vision on autopilot, more or less. So you've gone through deep alignment and future articulation. Then you have to make the choice whether you want to help the current system move towards that future, or whether you want to step out of the current system and start building that future. So I call these two modes caterpillar killing and butterfly birthing. So caterpillar killing is all about helping the caterpillar dissolve, which is a nicer way to say caterpillar killing, and go into the chrysalis and reconfigure towards a new state, a new mode of being. Butterfly birthing, to me, is much more fun, but maybe also more important. I experience that I find more people that are misaligned in the caterpillar killing area because I am engaging with the caterpillar. I find more people that are aligned and therefore in the asshole-free zone if I'm engaging in butterfly birthing. So I personally have a tendency towards butterfly birthing, and that means that I want to contribute to do two things: try and log out of the current system as quickly as possible, emotionally, physically, in any way possible, and the other portion is to identify the missing infrastructure and direct as much capacity towards building that infrastructure as possible. And I find that super hard, but I also find that super inspiring. And that is bringing me, I think, yeah, that is the last thingy here on my slide deck. So yeah, that's what I had to say about asshole-free zone and all of that stuff. And I'd love to open this for an open conversation. So anybody who feels compelled, just unmute yourself, show your video if possible, and share what you have to share.
Thomas, as a person who really has been living in his head for most of his life, and that's now, as you know, well over 80, how do I trigger that writing that it just flows automatically? Because I always sit there, I mean, in other situations where you're asked, just reflect and put it down on a piece of paper and let your pencil or your pen guide you. And something, as far as I'm concerned, always interferes. And I think, what do I write? How should I write it? Instead of just letting it go. Mm-hmm. What is the process to
so I know you're super disciplined. This guy does 80 push-ups every day. So so I would say you do it in the same way as you started to walk. You tried 400 times and failed. Right? That's the average that we take as a baby to start walking. 400 times we fall, and then we can actually walk. So you just do it every day. You try every day, and one day it'll work. That's all I can say about that.
Okay.
It will work, I promise.
Thank you so much, Thomas, for sharing your wisdom. I was so curious to learn more about these 7 questions, and these, you really brought in at the end some very concrete approaches. Are you sharing them with us? So I was curious to hear the
with
questions.
pleasure. With pleasure. So, so one way is very easy. I'm going to pop in a URL in here that you can just download them from. But I can also quickly go through them. So question number one is the question around how do we organize supply? So how do we source, refine, and distribute stuff, right? We need that. We need food and we need chairs and all of that, those things. How do we organize that? And really imagine this in a fresh way, right? So one way I really like is, or I'm coming from the end now, but one picture that I really work towards is every child, when they're born, they get a box, and a box contains seeds and microorganisms, and those microorganisms can be used to create stuff. You can mixed with the right materials and in the right environment, petri dish, you can let them grow into productive materials. You can let them grow into windows and all of that stuff. And of course, the seeds you can use for food. So this could be thinking from a new perspective into material sciences. You can really come up with deeply new ways of thinking about organizing supply. So that's one. Then question number two is, how do we know who needs what, when, where, right? Signaling. Currently, we're using mostly money for that and some politics. But we could also think about money in different ways, right? Financial capital is just one form of potential. We also have cultural capital and social capital and material and living, etc., right? So how can we use these for different modes of signaling? And how can we signal the right things to the right people at the right time? Do we have radiuses around the signals? Some things are relevant for your neighborhood only, or some things are only relevant for your bedroom, but other things might be relevant for the whole world, right? So how do you and that then ties into the third question: how do we govern? What are the decision-making processes? At what levels do we make what decisions, and who is authorized to make them? Why, right? How do we get to these processes? We can think about in these, like something, I used that term before, but we could introduce a chrysalis moment in our policies, where we allow all rules to dissolve for a day, a week, and see which rules are obsolete and which other rules should emerge fresh, right? Or we could add, that's very favored among libertarians. We could have sunsets, right? Sunsetting regulations forces us to really think about whether we still want to have them, because if we don't think about that, then we'll just move out another way. And then we move towards more the social and the individual. So how do we manage knowledge? That's another important question, right? I'm not saying education. Education is a part of managing knowledge, but learning is also a part of managing knowledge. So what's the difference between education and learning, right? And where does it start and where does it end? And who controls the content of that? These are important sub questions of that. And you can, if you really think about this from openly from the bottom, you might arrive at different concepts than we are using at this point. Then a question is, how do we relate to others? And what kind of group configurations do we want, right? Do we think everything starts with a couple, or do we think everything starts with a community, or how do we organize this? How do we relate to other people? How can we build trust? How can we build a connection with other people? Important questions. And then, how do we nurture the body? Right. So if we can nurture our body in a way that doesn't have to feed the money of a money return cycle, then we'll probably don't eat so much sugar. Right. Very easy. Because sugar is an evolutionary driver, or comes out of our evolutionary need for energy. So of course we're going to eat sugar and fat. It tastes delicious. That's an old trick, right? So if you want to sell more, put more of that stuff in. So okay, so how do we nurture our bodies in a way that they stay healthy? How do we find ways of making ourselves healthy again if our health breaks down? And then this is the most controversial, because Jim calls it the S word. How do we mind the spirit, right? I think that's an important element. How do we mind for that which we cannot mind for? What is that thing that is more than the sum total of our atoms, but that we know is there, right? And how do we care for that? So these are the 7 questions. That was long, I know, but
thank you.
Pleasure. Anything else?
I have a question for you, Thomas.
Abdul, go ahead.
Was it scary for you to go on this trip?
Which trip? Which part of it?
Sitting alone in the room and writing your thoughts and encountering your thoughts.
Was that scary? It was definitely weird. I don't know if it was scary. I think I was more curious about what was going to happen than I was scared. To see what I really wanted. So I made this. It actually is related to a very interesting experiment I had with a former partner of mine. We at one point, probably you've encountered this all in relationships. You don't know really what to say to each other anymore at one point, because you've said it all, and then the conversation revolves around who has to buy the butter, and so we decided we're going to not talk to each other for a week, just to see what we really want to say, and then really interesting stuff comes up, right? Now suddenly, because of that that restriction, suddenly you want to say something, and all of these things come up. It's really beautiful, and so in a way, I was hoping for something similar, but alone. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm honestly scared shitless on attempting this journey.
Why? What scares you then?
I don't know. That's just the feeling I have now. Just listening to you and imagining me going through this, scared shitless.
What would happen? Why?
I don't know. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to think about trying it or try it, but yeah, that's where I am.
I figure if it scares me, it's probably good.
Fair enough. I'll take it.
I look forward to having that conversation, Abdul.
I think I have a certain understanding for Abdul, even though I wasn't aware it would happen. When I finally realized I needed to stop drinking because I had a serious problem. And I went on a terrible bender for about 5 days. Believe you me, it was absolutely terrible. And then I stopped. And that's when the fear came in. If I would have had a pill that would have easily taken the pain away and even killed me, I possibly would have taken it. That's how scared, how scary that situation was. So, because I was facing all of a sudden myself, because one of the reasons I'm a typical environmental drinker or was, for me, alcohol was a means of escape. And now this fear came because I didn't know who I was, I didn't know what I wanted, etc., etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think fear is super important. One of the most important books I've ever had or had the pleasure of receiving in my life, my mom gave me when I was 16. It's I don't know the English title. It's Fritz Riemann, Grundformen der Angst in German. So basic forms of fear. I don't know. And he really goes through a very interesting framework of dissecting your fear and going really deep on that. And I think it becomes harder as older as you get to read that book, because you're entangled more in the things that we call life, and to untangle that from a place of fear is super, super hard. So reading that at 16, where you're still relatively untangled, was really, really good for me. It gave me a tool set to experience fear as more as a signal, and be clear about what that fear wants from me, than reacting to it. So responding rather than reacting. But it's painful. I just went. Some of you know, I just exchanged a box in a box where I used to live, with a flat in Berlin, for a hunk of steel floating on water, which was very strange, right? Giving up the subjective felt comfort and safety and all of the all of it that comes with being in a house on land, in a city, and exchanging that for no connection to the land, being responsible for all of your ins and outs. That was really pretty scary. But even on a lower level, I just stopped drinking coffee like 3 weeks ago or something. And I'm a heavy coffee drinker when I drink coffee. I can do anything between 6 and 14 espresso per day, really easily. And going from that to nothing and feeling really good at 5 in the morning without coffee, that was very interesting journey. So I can totally relate to what you said, Hermann. And not at the level you were experiencing that, but I think I can still relate somewhat.
One reflection on the untangling. I think one also needs to become realistic. I had a conversation with you the other day, you may remember. And I think for the rest of who don't know me, I'm 83 years of age. And by the way, despite abuse of alcohol, quite healthy. Because I've ever since been leading actually even as a drinker, I've been leading a healthy and a very sporty life. But I think at my age, I have to come to grips that there are certain things I just have to live with and make the best out of the situation I'm in. There are things I would love to have untangled 50 years ago. But I think I need to accept that this is now beyond and just focus on what I love doing. And guys, one thing, I live my passion, I really do. I'm absolutely fulfilled what I'm working at and with and for. So from that point of view, I think I've achieved a goal which not everyone does. But the untangling process, it took me a long time. I had to come to grips with and say, it's not going to work with everything. And by the way I live and or conduct my life, there are certain things which all of a sudden are not important anymore. So whether they're still there or not is irrelevant.
Thank you, Hermann. Stefan, you wanted to add something?
Say two things. Do you hear me? Yeah, perfect. Hermann, by the way, is amazing to meet you and listen to your comments, both in the other workshop and here. And we're going to have a call next week also. But what I get out of this, Thomas, is somehow it is taking the responsibility to yourself, saying, I'm not going to react. I'm acting on what's going on in my mind. I'm acting on who I am. What are the values for me? Because I think what is happening, and you can say, perhaps that's also happened to Hermann, you're getting into a habit where you either you drink some drinks, or you go on YouTube, you watch some, or you turn on the news, and this becomes a habit. And then you get we are unlimited in the projection of news on information, and we can just press a button. It could either be YouTube, it could be news, and then we are just reacting to what's going on, or emails, instead of actually sitting down, thinking about where you are, what you want to do, what space you want to develop in. And for me, this is a super interesting, very, I say, an intimate conversation or discussion that could go on for 3 hours, because I would somehow, you created this space, Thomas, right now, where I would like to hear from everyone and hear everyone's input. And this is just this space is not happening very often, because go back, think about yourself. I love to go through your 7 steps there. I did not take part of the first part of this, but in that way, I'm so curious to actually see and hear more about people who are taking it to their own responsibility in terms of finding out the way in life. And there's so many interesting stories to find. So thanks for sharing that, Thomas. Always important for yourself to consider.
Thank you, Stefan. These are beautiful closing remarks for this hour. Thank you so much. Yeah, it's about sovereignty, true sovereignty. I posted 2 more links here because Jörg asked for the protocol. I put the protocol into a little PDF you can get on rootsfactor.com. I put that into the link here, into the chat. And Hermann and Abdo and Lihi and Felix, they all know we sometimes get together. Ulf was also there at something we call Full Circle. So if you like having these kinds of conversations, just subscribe yourself there. Okay. With that, thank you so much for joining the session.